Welcome to a special edition of Gruesome Magazine, or maybe it's Gruesome Music, or maybe it's Decades of Horror, the classic era. I'm not sure. Stay tuned and find out.
Gruesome Magazine.
All right, so regular listeners probably don't recognize this other gentleman. With me today is Josh Robbins of the Invincible Czars, who is about to embark on a 2-month tour of playing their score or soundtrack live for showings of Nosferatu for the 100th anniversary. First, I'd like to let Invincible Czar fans, if we get some bleed over, just kind of let people know what we do. So I mentioned Gruesome Magazine. We're part of Gruesome Magazine. Check out the Gruesome Magazine YouTube channel. There is Horror News Radio, which does a weekly horror news broadcast of about 30 minutes. Gruesome Magazine does reviews of video on demand, streaming, and theatrical releases of horror movies. Decades of Horror, we talk about older horror movies, and there are 3 incarnations of that. Decades of Horror, the classic era, which covers everything up through 1969, and then Decades of Horror, the 1970s, and Decades of Horror, the 1980s. And then we also have one called Heroes and Droids, which covers movie and TV in the sci-fi, superhero, and high action genres. So to find these, if you go to the Gruesome Magazine YouTube channel, you can see the Gruesome Magazine, Horror News Radio, and Decades of Horror podcasts. Heroes and Droids has its own YouTube channel, so look for that. Or you can go to the Gruesome Magazine website, gruesomemagazine.com, and everything is linked there. Or if you're listening on audio podcast apps, there's a Horror News Radio subscription, which will give you Horror News Radio and all of the Decades of Horror podcasts. Or you can subscribe to the Decades of Horror podcast individually, classic era 70s or 80s. Also, there's a Gruesome Magazine podcast you can subscribe to, and Heroes and Droids. All right. Got that out of the way. So, Josh.
Yes.
Mr. Invincible Czars, and we'll throw this up here. And just to get us going here. Yeah. I would, you know what? Well, I'll talk about that later. I would buy one of those, but your sizes aren't big enough.
I know we need to get. We haven't made any of these in a long time. I think all we've got are women's sizes right now.
Oh, that could be. So, I first found out about Invincible Czars when I went to see a showing of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari at the Fleur Theater in Des Moines. Not realizing at all that I was getting live music with it, which is weird. So I showed up and I saw the band setting up, and I thought, "Oh crap! This could go one of 2 ways." And I was astounded. I was thoroughly impressed. They were awesome, and I bought some merchandise there, and I've been following them ever since. And I was excited to hear their current incarnation. So what's going on, Josh?
Well, why are we here? Well, we're about to, as you said at the beginning, we're about to embark on the biggest tour we've ever done. My gosh, 2 months across pretty much all of the U.S. and a little bit of Canada. Yep, there's our itinerary there. You know what? I think I got when I think the L.A. date is wrong. It's actually the 26th.
Okay.
Now I
go to the website. Go to invincibleczars.com.
That has all the ticketing information for our shows. And yeah, but I mean, look at this itinerary. We barely have a day off in October, and it's exciting. It's been a lot of prep.
I'm a list guy, so I looked it up. 47 dates, 19 states, 2 Canadian provinces.
Yeah. We actually just added 2 more. We're doing Norfolk, Virginia, and we added one in Toronto, Ontario. So now it's 49 dates.
Oh, okay.
We need to announce those, but yeah. So it's quite a thing. 5 of us on this tour. It's the first time we've had 5 in a long time because early, when we started doing the silent movies, we didn't actually start out doing silent movies. movies. Oh yeah, there's our photo. This is a photo of the people who are on the recording of the Nosferatu soundtrack, which we'll have available. We're actually going to have DVDs for sale of the movie with our soundtrack on it. And those are the players. But yeah, when we tour, we break it down, and we'll just have 5 of us. And when you saw us, Jeff, you would have seen us with just 4, because for a long time we were touring with no drums at all, and just kind of.
It seems like you guys were hopping around a lot.
Yeah, we tend to do that for live, because it's just, you know, the fewer mouths to feed out there, the better. You know, it's less gear, less people to tote around. So we added drums, and you know, when we you haven't seen us do Nosferatu. When we toured with
I haven't.
Back in, I think the big tour that we did for it was 2016, when we first really created the soundtrack, and we've done it here and there since then. But it wasn't written with drums. It was a little bit different, and so as we approached the Centennial, especially during COVID, where we weren't really playing any shows, we thought it was a good opportunity to revamp and revisit our score. And that's when we, you know, really, let's add drums back in. Let's refine this. Let's make sure that we like everything. Because, you know, creating a soundtrack for a 94-minute film, it's, you know, that has to be performed live. With that limitation, it makes, what am I trying to say? It makes like really precise things that we're used to from modern day movies with, you know, pre-recorded soundtracks. It makes some of that precision really hard to execute.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to go back through and kind of smooth some of that over. Like, if this is a spot where we, you know, like we're trying to get this hit, but we only do it like 25% of the time. Okay, why don't we make that something we can nail every time? So we spent about a year just revamping it from June to June. And we're really excited to finally do it live. So.
No, I'm excited to see it. I know you're coming to Des Moines. I'm switching the background there so those colors don't clash with what the designs were throwing up.
Yeah, this looks better with what we're wearing.
Yeah, so yeah, I know you're working out. So what, you got a lot of merchandise available with this too. What all are you putting out?
Oh yeah, well the poster, or I guess, this way, that you see there was drawn by Leah Levies, and we had a black and white version of it that we've sold for years. But you know, since it was the 100th anniversary, why not colorize it? And this is the colorized version. She did a pretty great job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny to look at it because I'm used to the black and white one, and when I see this, I see that the first eye in Invincible does not have a dot on it, but the other ones do. I never noticed that until she did this colorized version. But yeah, so we've got the posters. We'll have a t-shirt version of this that's a little simpler. And then, of course, we've got the old black and white posters that we've always had. And we'll have the DVD, which will be the whole movie with not only our soundtrack, but we redid all of the you know, the intertitle cards, the narration and the dialogue cards, to be a little bit more interesting to look at. And with our own little frame, there's the DVD cover. And that's got some lines on it to show where it'll fold. And the image on the right, of course, is the front. The image on the left is the back. This is the layout that we sent to the artist. So it's got all their borders and stuff on it. Interesting to see like that. And then we'll have, we will also have some key drives, like some flash drives, thumb drives that have the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari on them. The drives that we did for Nosferatu were really only for our Kickstarter people. So we did about 100 of those, but we won't have those for sale, unfortunately. We've got some picks because Ernie Ball, the string and guitar company, is an in-kind sponsor on our tour. So they're providing us with cables and strings and things like that we need. They made a bunch of picks with our logo on them. So that was pretty cool. We'll have those available. And I guess I should mention that Roland Keyboards is also an in-kind sponsor. They gave us a really good deal on some keyboards that we badly needed to upgrade. We've been using the same old Nord Electro 2, which is a great keyboard, but I think they make the Electro 5 now. Ours is about a 20-year-old keyboard that's been on the road with us for about that long, and it's kind of fallen apart. So Roland gave us a good deal, and we're excited to be partnering with them. But what else will we have? Well, of course, we'll have Dr. Caligari shirts and stuff as well from our tour that we did back in 2019. Weird to think that it was 3 years ago that you saw that show.
Yeah.
The Fleur, the pandemic's kind of had this Rip Van Winkle effect, is what my friend Yanni says. It seems like it was just the other day, right? No, 3 years ago. Very strange. So. Yeah,
it is. It is. So, I mean, I looked a little bit at your website, and they called you on your website. You call yourself, or maybe somebody called you this, Austin's Emperors of Eclecticism.
Yeah, a publicity person called us that, or like a press or media person called us that once, and I thought that's pretty good. So we just kept.
I'll let you. I'm going to read this, but I let you add to this. Your description of yourself, I guess, is: we make cinematic experimental rock for music nerds, horror fans, film lovers, followers of science fiction and fact, comics, cartoons, and humor, and anyone with a complicated relationship with heavy metal and classical music.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how long it's been since you read that. Sometimes is that a fair description right now?
It is still a fair description, I think, especially the complicated relationship with classical music and heavy metal. Those two genres have much snobbery on very opposite ends of the spectrum of snobbery.
You're not official. Yes, I could see that. So I saw something else there where it said the Alamo Drafthouse called you one of the best silent film orchestras in the nation, and many art house cinemas and film festivals have echoed that. I saw several of your dates are at Alamo Drafthouses.
We've had a good relationship with them because that's where we started. We're based in Austin, and that's where the Alamo started. When the first silent movies that we did, when we first started doing that, accompanying silent film, were at the original Alamo, which is no longer there, in downtown Austin. So as they've branched out and become more of a bit more of a national chain, they've kind of gone corporate over the years. We've kind of just come along with them a bit, and they're always great to us. I've got to say that I think that they did a pretty good job, or they've done a pretty good job of moving into that corporate realm without losing a lot of the elements that made them different from other movie theaters when they were a smaller organization. For example, the Alamo is the only corporate type movie theater chain. They're the only movie theater chain that hosts what we do. You're not going to see us at AMC's or Carmike or I'm trying to think of Tinseltowns or any of the other multiplex theaters out there. They're just they don't have that kind of what am I trying to say? That they don't really have the same ethos or the same reason to exist that the Alamo did. Those theaters. Right. Though I will say, I think those theaters have taken a cue from the Alamo Drafthouse, because now those theaters will have pizza and hamburgers, and sometimes they have beer and alcohol.
Right.
Beer and wine, rather.
And, living in Iowa, I've never been to an Alamo Drafthouse, although all of my friends that are in areas where they have them absolutely love them. Yeah. So I think the closest one to me is Omaha, but that's probably a 2.5 hour drive or so.
Oh yeah, 2.5. There will be one in Chicago in the near future. So.
Maybe we'll have to
give them a shot.
Yeah, I don't know if Des Moines. Well, I'd like to go there for if I could go there for anything else, and then make sure it pick something up there. That'd be great. But
yeah.
So, and where you were in Des Moines, the Fleur was a place that would carry movies that I weren't like. I went and saw, for instance, The Shape of Water there because it wasn't playing at any of
anywhere else
theaters, any of the chain theaters until it won an Academy Award. Then all of a sudden it shows up everywhere. But or Parasite, I had to go there to see Parasite.
Oh yeah,
another
same thing
movie.
Yeah.
And they would do a lot of old movies, special nights where I'd see things like Creature from the Black Lagoon or The Bride of Frankenstein on the big screen. Yeah. So I was thrilled when they were showing The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Unfortunately, they have not reopened since the pandemic. So we'll have to check out the facility you're going to be in. So how did you guys get started at this? I mean, what drove you to? It's kind of I'm sure you didn't grow up thinking I'm gonna write and record and play silent film scores.
Not exactly, but you're not far off. I mean, my sister and I grew up watching a lot of movies, and not horror movies so much, although we liked spooky movies. We were kids, so it's not like we weren't one of those from one of those families where it's okay to watch Friday the 13th at the age of 9 or something like that. But we did like a couple of Disney movies that were pretty spooky for their time, particularly The Watcher in the Woods. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
I think they made a show of it later. And then there was another one called The Child of Glass that we really liked. Also from the kind of late 70s. It's set in Louisiana.
Okay.
Anyway, so we would watch movies over and over and over and over and over. And sorry, there's a bird in here that's chirping. And we paid a lot of attention to the music. We knew every note of the soundtracks of these movies that we really loved. And of course we watched the movies of the day as well, Back to the Future and of course Star Wars. But we really paid attention to the music. And in fact, I would make cassette tapes of the music from movies that I liked. My dad had in the 80s, this was novel back then. I mean, it's easy to do now, but my dad had his cassette tape, or he had his whole stereo systems. It was one big thing, and you could just record the audio off of a VHS tape. So I would record my favorite parts of soundtracks and play them on a kind of like a tape player with a single speaker, a tiny little speaker in my backpack, and ride on my bike and just listen to this music. And some of it was soundtracky, and some of it was just like the rock songs that were in, the soundtrack, right. Like Huey Lewis and the News or something in Back to the Future, So I always liked movie music. I would buy soundtracks for, Beetlejuice and Pee-wee. I loved Danny Elfman. I mean, who didn't or doesn't? And so that was, it's weird that I didn't think to go into that. Of course I love rock and heavy metal and stuff and Eddie Van Halen. And so I wanted to be a guitar player, and that wasn't exactly what I was hearing in these cinematic scores. But then when I moved to Austin, I saw that they were showing, I can't remember what movie it was, but it was a silent movie with a live band. And I thought, that sounds really cool, because I already liked these old movies. I used to rent Dracula every weekend and watch it as many times as I could, the Bela Lugosi.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So I've seen that one a lot of times. So I thought, that'd be cool. I love the old black and white movies, and I had never seen a silent movie before. And I think the first one I saw actually was Faust. We were talking about Faust before, and it was good. It was a soundtrack by Graham Reynolds, who is a real deal film score composer these days. He's based here in Austin, and he's kind of become Richard Linklater's guy. He did Scanner Darkly back in 2006, and Bernie, and he's done a few other things for Linklater and other directors. But yeah, so I went and saw that, and it was so good, and I thought, man, this is really good. I'll come to the next one. And I came to the next one I saw was a movie called Destiny. That's a Fritz Lang movie. And the band that did the soundtrack for that didn't do a very good job, in my opinion. I was bored by their soundtrack. The movie was really good, but the soundtrack it just kind of seemed like they were jamming their existing psychedelic rock music with the movie as more of a backdrop. You know, the music and the movie seemed totally disconnected from each other. And I remember leaving and thinking, that wasn't that good. I could do a better job than that. And so, you know, the years passed and we got the opportunity to do one at the Alamo. And I said, yes, let's do it. And it was a Russian sci-fi movie called Aelita, Queen of Mars, which is kind of a boring movie. It's, you know, the European silent movies suffer a lot from lost footage as a result of the world wars. And they're, you know, with Aelita, the version of it that we have today is full of dead end subplots that just, you know, come out of the movie going, why, what was that whole thing with that guy and his wife? And then, I don't know. Anyway, so there was a lot of that we were kind of like, what do we do with this? You know, but we did it and had a good time. And then the Alamo asked us if we wanted to do another one. And I said, let's do Destiny, because I knew we could do a better job than that band that I saw do it. So Destiny was the second one we did. And by then, the Alamo had started to branch outside of Austin. And so I remember we did it in Houston. And so that was a big deal. Went out of town to do it. And so that's when I got the idea, well, why don't we take these, you know, it's a lot of work to write 90 minutes of music. It's like writing a double album, basically. Why don't we find there must be other theaters out there, because I knew growing up in Dallas, there was the Inwood Theater. There were several independent art house type cinemas that I thought would be into something like this. And so I started contacting them, and, you know, most of them were just kind of like, we're not equipped for a live band. Sorry. But more and more of them started saying, yeah, let's try this. And the Texas Theater in Dallas did, of course, the Alamo in Houston. Then we branched out to Albuquerque and Mobile, Alabama. We kind of had this I-10, I-40 kind of south central part of the U.S. little circuit that we would go on, and we just kept building it up from there. And when we finally added Nosferatu was when we found that really opened it up. Places that had previously said no were suddenly more willing, because we were doing a title that was actually known. I mean, these like, who's heard of Aelita, Queen of Mars, or Destiny, or The Unknown, or The Wind? You know, these aren't you, of course, but you know, these art house cinemas, especially lately, especially post COVID, have really suffered from the fact that big theaters are, you know, they're showing all the A24 films and the movies you were talking about, like Parasite, and you know, these independent films where, you know, it used to be that they would only show in art house cinemas. Now they kind of just come out everywhere. And so I think more and more art houses have been increasingly interested in programming like what we do, not necessarily what we do, but like what we do. Although we hope they'll be interested in what we do, because it sets them apart from the AMCs and the Tinseltowns and all of that. So it was kind of a long answer to your question.
No.
I think the short answer was the Alamo asked us to do it, and we took a leap and did it, and we just kept doing it. Unlike most of the other groups in Austin that did it, and there were plenty of them. There are others here in town that still do it.
Well, you sound like a lot of the people that are on our podcast. We've got some of them are filmmakers or makeup artists, or one of them's a comic book artist, or but they grew up, you know, they were like monster kids, and they grew up in whatever they were attracted to. A couple of them are, most of the special effects people that I know, they grew up like entranced with stop motion animation. and they were making their own versions of that when they were kids and stuff. And this sounds a little bit like what you're talking about, only in your version, it's music, right?
Yeah. Of course, then it was, video editing is something most people do, even just on their phones these days. It's not like it's not so far out of reach. But in the 80s, doing something like that would have required. I mean, we didn't even own a camera, so I wasn't. It's not like my sister and I were shooting. We would rent a video camera and take home movies of our family and play jokes on each other. But we didn't think to try to sync up music to it.
These guys would like get Super 8s and try to shoot it like a frame or a second at a
one
time.
frame.
I mean, that was all they could do, and that's what's sort of cool about it is it's open to making things work. I guess it's the whole point of at least special effects, and I think music as well is you don't notice it, but it's sort of like a magic act that draws your attention and helps create the emotion that we're looking for. So.
Yeah, I just go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I loved you, so I got a chance to listen to your score for this one, and I thought it was great. I really.
Oh, good. It. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. We spent a lot of time on it, and the thing I'm glad you enjoyed it, because the thing I always wonder about with the balance that we try to strike constantly is between complimenting the movie, doing something that actually works with what's happening on screen, and doing something that's not boring to modern day audiences. To be frank, these old movies are slow. They're slow paced. Sometimes there's missing footage, and it can be a bit confusing. And so we're trying to use the music, or we're trying to use the music to help tell the story. Not so much draw attention to ourselves as a band, but to do what you just said about highlighting the emotion that's already on there. One thing that has become more common in cinema in the last 20 years or so, and I think you'll know what I'm talking about when I start saying it. Maybe you can think of some examples of it. But it'll be where the music seems so mismatched from the moment that it works. Like maybe there's a scene where in an action movie where somebody comes in and it's guns blazing and it's all slow-mo and it's set to, don't they know it's the end of the world, or something.
So what I go for, and in reviewing movies, this is something I've come to in my as I got older, was when we talk about movies, I usually watch them at least a couple times. The first time I'm just being a spectator, and the second time I'm going, boy, that scene was really tense. Why was that scene so tense? And almost always one of the components is the music.
The music.
And and the fact that I didn't notice it, that the music was making me that tense, is what's really cool about it too.
That is what's pretty cool about it. And in the example when I was saying about, where they'll purposely use something that seems so far removed, but it actually works. That doesn't work as much for these silent movies.
Yeah.
So there are some tricks like that we can't really pull out. And
you're right. And there's some movies that I just am like going, wow, this music is just, it's too overpowering. It's taken me out of it. It's like, and you don't, sometimes you don't really get it. You just sort of like going, I didn't like that movie. And, and it's hard to figure out what it was. Is it editing? Is it the music? Is it
editing is a big thing. But the music is, there's one film composer, and I won't say his name because I have a lot of respect for this guy, but I just don't like his film scores. He's a musician, and he's a rock and roll musician who's gone film score. I'll say that, and maybe that will be enough for people to figure it out. But every time that I really don't like a score to a movie, and I look who it is, it's this guy every time. And so I think sometimes we just have, they're just as there are bands that we connect with and musicians connect with, or movie genres or movie directors we connect with. Sometimes the score, as you're saying, can really bring you into it or kind of just leave you sitting.
Well, and you're absolutely right. It is subjective to a point.
So subjective. Yeah. Because other people love this guy. And it's just
well, it's like actors. You know, when we were doing a movie, one of the co-hosts will talk about what a terrible job an actor did, and I'm like, I don't know, seemed okay to me. I didn't notice anything. So,
yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe it was fixed in editing, or but like, I think what your point there is that it is subjective. Like, wow, what is it that you hated about this? And
so you guys are heading out on this pretty quick, right?
Pretty soon, 2 weeks from
September 3rd.
Kick it off in Lubbock. Yeah. Was it the 5th? Yeah, it's just so small it looks like a 3.
The 5th, yeah.
We'll go up to Seattle and then down the coast and back around and then
so don't use this as the complete list, is what you're saying.
There are 2 more on there that I need to still add to this graphic, and then of course I see that I made a mistake on LA. LA is the 26th. 2 shows, although it doesn't matter at this point. I think it's sold out. So.
Oh wow!
Yes, it's been surprising to LA.
Jeez,
New York.
I better buy my tickets, I guess.
Yeah, get one soon. We do have a lot. We do usually sell a lot in Des Moines. Our dog is barking here. Hey, Snart, it's okay.
Well, there's it's one of the things I've found out sort of after the fact is the kind of slowly getting connected to the horror community in Iowa.
Really? Yeah.
It's kind of spread out.
I bet.
So a guy that I know that lives like, I don't know, like 30 miles north of me, which is farther from Des Moines, he was at Bride of Frankenstein and had a table out there showing off his Frankenstein collection. And so I've connected with him, and he's got collections he had a Creature from the Black Lagoon collection too, so it was, so it's nice to meet people like that. And he's got friends in Des Moines, and now I've met the editor and owner of Little Shop of Horrors, owner, publisher. So we'll try to hook up with him because I know he went to your Caligari show 3 years ago. So.
Oh yeah, well yeah, we'll have to meet him for real this time then.
Why, Josh? Is there anything else you want to get out there in terms of the tour?
Not. I mean, I think the only thing I've been trying to tell people lately, the question that I get so often these days is, why are you guys called the Invincible Czars?
I was trying not to ask that because I thought, where do you come up with your name? Where do you get your ideas?
Well, I think that one's, I mean, I'm happy to talk about those things, of course, but that one's worth addressing because I think we're about to celebrate 20 years of being a band next year, but we've only been doing the silent movie thing. I mean, our first silent movie was in 2006 or 7, which seems like a long time ago, but it's not the primary. It didn't become the primary thing that we did until 2016 or 17. We've done all kinds of other music. And I guess that as we've moved more and more into silent film, at this point, it's all that we've been doing. Although over the pandemic, I mentioned Eddie Van Halen before. When Eddie Van Halen died, I was so sad, and we did a tribute to him. Did 5 Van Halen songs in the Invincible Czars crazy style. But we have done other stuff, and our name was not made up when we. If we had started doing silent films, maybe we'd just be the Austin Silent Film Orchestra or something like that. So that's a question that I wanted to address. The other thing is that I'm really interested in making music for movies that aren't old silent films, So if there are filmmakers out there that are interested, that need soundtrack work, I guess I should say, in touch. I've done several student films and short films here in Austin. Some of them actually won, awards at little film festivals. And I'm very interested in doing more of this kind of work because I think it's very fun. I love doing cinematic stuff, and I love learning and meeting people who have ideas of how to make suspenseful film even more suspenseful using sound.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So, so I still didn't quite get, where did the name come from?
Oh, the name. Oh, I didn't tell. The name where it actually came from was just it's the story of so many bands. We were a band that was playing and doing our kind of zany, what was it I said in that description, cinematic rock, because our music has always sounded, from the very beginning, people would say, man, your music sounds like it should be in a movie. And back then we had a lot more Eastern European flair in our music, and we still do,
Okay.
but it was a lot more back then. And the original bass player, his name's Tom. He still plays with us from time to time. He's in Austin. He and I were trying to think of the names, and really the whole band was trying to think of it. And Tom said, why don't we be the Something Czars? And I said, okay, yeah, I like that. Let's go with that. And this was in the earlier days of the internet, like 2002, 2003. And so we had a web page with just a list of descriptors, and it probably had 100 descriptors on it. And anytime one of us thought of it, we'd just go up there and type it in. So we had it on the list. And then we booked our first show, and we still didn't have a name. And they said, we need you guys to tell us your name by this date so we can put it in the newspaper ad. So we, announcing our shows for the month. So Tom and I were scanning through there, and I think it was me that had come up with Invincible as one of the descriptors, and I think it was him, but I'm not sure. It's so long ago. One of us said, Invincible Czars. How about that? That sounds tough. And we said, okay, let's go with that. We need something. And so that's the not very glamorous story of how we got our name.
Well, I like the logo and the design. I think that's excellent.
Oh, I'm so glad you like it. Yeah, it's it was done by Leah Levies, who did that Nosferatu poster.
Mm-hmm.
She does all the posters these days. And yeah, I like it. Somebody told me once, I don't know about your logo. It looks a little bit Third Reich. And I said, well, maybe I guess
I wasn't going there, but no, I like the letter design, the overlap of the A and the R.
Yeah, she did such a great job. It's very unique. That's for sure. If something can be very unique.
All right. So I'll just, everybody, please, I would strongly, highly recommend, if you're in any of the locations on this tour date, and again, there was like 19 states and a couple of Canadian provinces mixed in there.
Yeah.
And the best way to do it is go to invincibleczars.com, and they have links to buying tickets at all the venues, I believe.
All the venues. So some of them are still putting tickets up. Like I think that there are still not tickets up in I can't think of what towns. Maybe the DC area doesn't have tickets up yet.
Oh, okay.
So if you're in DC, they're coming. They'll be up there in the next couple of weeks. So but those shows aren't until those are later in the tour anyway. They're still 2 months off. So
yeah. All right. So I appreciate your time, Josh. It's great talking to you again.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on here, and I'm so glad that you're still going. So many theaters and other creative people just kind of hung it up during the pandemic. So I'm glad y'all are still here.
Well, you too. I one of our listeners works for KNB Effects, Effects, or KNB Effects Group in LA, which are the guys that do The Walking Dead and tons of other stuff, Creepshow and that kind of stuff. He had opened up a restaurant, a horror themed restaurant, and it just happened to open like right when the pandemic started.
Oh, wow. So that is it no more?
No, it was in LA. I think he may bring it back up, but I had contacted him when I was in Southern California and said, hey, I want to come up, check out your restaurant. Well, it's not around anymore, but I'd be glad to give you a tour of KNB Effects. And I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
cool.
I'm there.
Did you do that? Wow.
Yeah, you make these connections, and so you're one of those connections for me. I love seeing how you guys are doing, and
likewise.
I'm really looking forward to checking you out in late Des Moines or late October in Des Moines.
Yeah, by then, man, we're gonna be tight. We're gonna have played it a lot of times. By the time you see it, it's gonna be just like, bing.
You may need some extra energy drinks by then too.
Yeah, by then, or just a nap.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, Josh, and say good night to everybody.
Good night, and see you out there.
Yeah.